There are moments in life when something is right in front of you, yet you don't see it. Not because it's hidden, not because it's rare, but because you're not ready. And this is one of the hardest truths to accept. We like to believe that if something is important enough, if something is meant for us, we will automatically recognize it. But that's not how the mind works. Your mind does not show you the world as it is. It shows you the world as you are. The same words can sound meaningless to one person and life-changing to another. The same opportunity can look risky to one mind and obvious to another. The same truth can feel threatening or freeing. What makes the difference is not intelligence, not luck, not timing. It's readiness. There are things you couldn't understand 5 years ago that feel simple now. There are lessons you once ignored that suddenly feel personal. And there are realizations that arrive quietly, only when you stop fighting them. This is not because the universe finally decided to reward you. It's because your mind reached a new level. Most people spend their lives chasing answers. More information, more motivation, more external proof. But real change doesn't come from adding more. It comes from becoming someone who can finally see. And seeing requires something uncomfortable. It requires letting go of the version of yourself that feels familiar. It requires releasing the need to be right. It requires admitting that maybe, until now, you weren't ready. Not weak, not broken, just not ready. That's not an insult, it's a stage. There is a phase where the mind protects itself. It filters out ideas that threaten identity. It resists truth that demand responsibility. It rejects clarity because clarity removes excuses. In that phase, growth feels offensive, silence feels empty, and change feels dangerous. But when readiness begins, something shifts. You stop reacting so quickly. You stop needing constant reassurance. You stop asking the same questions and start noticing the same patterns. You don't suddenly know everything. You simply see more clearly. This audiobook is not here to convince you of anything. It's not here to impress you, and it's not here to save you. It's here to meet you where your mind is now. Some parts may feel obvious. Others may feel uncomfortable. A few may land quietly and stay with you longer than expected. That's how readiness works. You don't force insight. You allow it. If something in this audiobook resonates, it's not because the words are special. It's because you are ready to hear them. And if something doesn't, that's okay too. Readiness cannot be rushed, but it can be honored. So don't listen to prove anything. Don't listen to agree or disagree. Listen with space. Because the moment your mind is ready, clarity doesn't shout, it appears. And when it does, you won't need permission to recognize it. Chapter 1. Your mind is a filter, not a window. Most people move through life believing they are seeing reality exactly as it is. They assume their thoughts are neutral, their perceptions are accurate, and their conclusions are logical. But this belief is one of the most subtle illusions the human mind creates. Your mind is not a clear window looking out at the world. It is a filter, and everything you experience passes through it first. What you notice, what you ignore, what feels important, what feels threatening, what feels possible, and what feels impossible are all shaped long before the moment you think you are deciding. Long before logic steps in, your mind has already selected what deserves your attention. Two people can live in the same city, work the same job, and face the same circumstances, yet experience completely different lives. One sees opportunity, the other sees limitation. One feels challenged, the other feels defeated. The environment is the same, the filter is not. Your beliefs decide what gets through. If you believe the world is unfair, your mind will highlight every example that confirms it. If you believe people can't be trusted, your attention will lock onto betrayal and ignore loyalty. If you believe you're not ready, not good enough, or not capable yet, your mind will quietly hide evidence that says otherwise. This is not because you are weak or broken. It's because the mind is designed to protect consistency. The brain values familiarity more than truth. It prefers predictable pain over uncertain growth. And to maintain that stability, it filters reality in a way that keeps your identity intact. This is why advice often feels useless. This is why motivation fades. This is why the same message can be heard 1,000 times, and suddenly, one day it lands. The message didn't change. The filter did. Your mindset is the lens that determines meaning. Without you realizing it, it edits reality in real time. It decides what is relevant, what is noise, and what should be dismissed before you even become aware of it. That's why clarity doesn't come from forcing answers. It comes from refining the filter. When your filter is shaped by fear, you see danger everywhere. When it's shaped by ego, you see threats to your pride. When it's shaped by avoidance, you see excuses that feel reasonable. But when your filter begins to shift, the same world starts to look different. You don't suddenly gain new information, you gain new perception. This is where most people get stuck. They try to change their lives without changing the lens through which they see life. They chase outcomes while carrying the same internal framework that created their current results. And when nothing changes, they blame circumstances. But circumstances are not the problem. Perception is. Your mind is constantly asking one silent question: what does this mean for me? And the answer it gives determines your emotional response, your decisions, and eventually, your direction. If your filter says, "This is a threat," you react defensively. If it says, "This is an opportunity," you lean in. If it says, "This is pointless," you disengage. Same event, different meaning, different outcome. This is why readiness matters. Until your mind is ready to interpret reality differently, you will keep seeing the same patterns repeat. You will attract the same lessons in different forms. You will feel like life is circling instead of moving forward. Not because life is stuck, but because your filter is unchanged. Readiness begins when you stop assuming your perspective is complete. When you pause instead of reacting. When you observe instead of judging. When you become curious about why you see things the way you do. This is uncomfortable work. It challenges identity. It exposes blind spots, and it removes the comfort of certainty, but it's also where growth actually begins. You don't upgrade your life by forcing optimism or repeating affirmations. You upgrade it by refining how you interpret what's already happening. The moment you realize your mind is a filter, you regain power. Because filters can be cleaned. They can be adjusted. They can be replaced. And when they change, your experience changes with them. You start noticing patterns you missed before. You recognize signals instead of obstacles. You respond instead of react. Nothing external may look different at first, but internally, everything has shifted. This is the foundation of readiness. Before you can see the next level of your life, you must become the kind of mind that can recognize it. And that process begins here, not by looking harder at the world, but by understanding the filter through which you see it. Chapter 2. Why truth feels uncomfortable. At first, there is a reason truth rarely feels peaceful when you encounter it for the first time. If truth were always comfortable, everyone would accept it immediately. But that's not how growth works. Truth unsettles before it stabilizes. It disrupts before it clarifies, and it challenges before it liberates. When something true enters your awareness, it often collides with an existing belief. And beliefs are not just ideas, they are emotional structures. They are tied to identity, safety, and the story you've been telling yourself about who you are and how the world works. So when truth appears, the mind doesn't ask, "Is this accurate?" It asks, "Is this safe?" And if the answer is no, resistance begins. This resistance is not weakness, it is protection. The mind's primary role is not to help you grow. It is to help you survive. Survival favors familiarity. Growth demands uncertainty. That is why the first response to truth is often discomfort. You feel tension, you feel defensive, you feel the urge to explain, justify, or reject. Sometimes you even feel irritated by the messenger. Not because they're wrong, but because something inside you recognizes the truth before you're ready to accept it. This is why people often reject the very insights that could change their lives. Not because they don't understand them intellectually, but because accepting them would require letting go of a version of themselves they are still attached to. Truth threatens identity. If the truth suggests you are responsible, it challenges victimhood. If it suggests discipline, it challenges comfort. If it suggests change, it challenges routine. And routine feels safe, even when it's slowly draining you. This is why growth is often delayed. Not because the answer is missing, but because the cost of accepting it feels too high. At first, think about the truths you resisted in the past, the advice you dismissed, the patterns you ignored, the warnings you brushed aside. At the time, they felt annoying, unnecessary, or exaggerated. But later, when your mind had matured, those same truths felt obvious, even simple. The truth didn't evolve. You did. This is one of the clearest signs of readiness. When truth no longer feels like an attack, but like guidance. Before that point, the ego is active. It interprets truth as judgment. It hears feedback as criticism. It frames insight as threat. The ego's job is to preserve self-image. And truth doesn't care about your image. Truth cares about alignment. That's why it feels sharp at first. Like cold water, like a sudden stop. But if you stay with it, without rushing to reject or defend, something shifts. The discomfort fades. Clarity begins to form. And what once felt confronting starts to feel grounding. Most people don't stay long enough for that shift to happen. They move away too quickly. They distract themselves. They rationalize. They return to familiar narratives. Not because they are incapable, but because sitting with discomfort requires courage and patience. There is a phase where truth feels heavier than illusion. Illusion feels lighter because it demands nothing. Truth feels heavier because it asks you to respond, to choose differently, to act with intention, to stop pretending. That weight is temporary. Once integrated, truth simplifies life. It reduces mental noise, it removes internal conflict, but before it does that, it must pass through resistance. This is why forcing truth doesn't work. You can't push insight into a mind that isn't ready. You can only create space for it. Space is created through stillness, through observation, through honesty. When you stop immediately reacting to discomfort, you begin to learn from it. You realize the tension isn't coming from the truth itself, but from the gap between who you are now and who you would need to become to live it. That gap feels like friction, but friction is how movement begins. The mistake most people make is assuming discomfort is a sign they're going the wrong way. In reality, discomfort is often confirmation that something real is happening. Growth rarely announces itself with relief. It usually begins with resistance. Readiness does not mean truth will feel pleasant. It means you will stop running from the discomfort it creates. You won't need to agree with everything immediately. You won't need to change overnight. You simply won't reject insight just because it challenges you. And that shift changes everything. Because the moment truth stops feeling like an enemy, it becomes a guide. And guides don't shout. They wait. They appear when you're quiet enough to listen. Chapter 3. The stage of not being ready. There is a stage in every transformation that most people misunderstand. A stage that feels frustrating, confusing, and often discouraging. It is the stage of not being ready. This stage is rarely talked about with honesty. Instead, it's often labeled as laziness, weakness, or failure. But in truth, it is none of those things. Not being ready is not a flaw. It is a phase, a necessary one. Before readiness arrives, the mind is still organizing itself. It is still holding on to old frameworks, old coping mechanisms, and old identities that once served a purpose. Letting go of them too early would feel destabilizing, even dangerous. So the mind resists. During this stage, you may feel stuck. You may feel like you understand what you should do, but can't seem to do it. You may consume information without applying it. You may feel inspired one moment and drained the next. This inconsistency is not a lack of willpower. It is a signal that your internal structure hasn't caught up yet. Most people try to escape this stage as quickly as possible. They push harder. They look for stronger motivation. They criticize themselves for not changing fast enough. But pressure doesn't create readiness. It creates resistance. Readiness develops quietly, beneath the surface, while nothing seems to be happening. And because it's invisible, many people assume they're regressing when they're actually preparing. Think of readiness like muscle growth. The work doesn't show immediately. It happens during recovery, not during effort. And if you interrupt that recovery with constant force, progress slows. In the stage of not being ready, certain patterns appear again and again. You might find yourself blaming external factors more easily. You might feel emotionally reactive. You might look for explanations that protect your current identity. This is not because you're dishonest. It's because your mind is still defending what feels familiar. Familiarity feels safe, even when it's limiting. The mind would rather stay consistent than be correct. So it delays acceptance of truths that would require a shift in behavior, responsibility, or self-image. This is why timing matters. The same insight that feels offensive today can feel obvious 6 months later. The same advice that feels irrelevant now can feel essential later. The information didn't change. The reader did. This is the stage where impatience causes damage. People abandon processes. They jump from idea to idea. They chase novelty instead of depth. They believe something is wrong with them because change isn't immediate. But readiness cannot be rushed without consequences. When change happens before readiness, it collapses. Habits don't stick. Insight fades. Motivation burns out. The mind returns to its old patterns because it hasn't fully reorganized itself yet. This is why so many people repeat the same cycles. They try to skip the stage of not being ready, but this stage is where the foundation is built. During this phase, something subtle is happening. Your mind is observing patterns. It's noticing contradictions. It's collecting evidence that the old way no longer works. It's quietly questioning assumptions that once felt unquestionable. You may not feel confident yet, but certainty is dissolving, and that is progress. Doubt is not the enemy here. Unquestioned certainty is. The stage of not being ready is uncomfortable because it sits between identities. You are no longer fully aligned with who you were, but you are not yet anchored in who you're becoming. That in-between space feels unstable, but it's also fertile. This is where awareness increases, where emotional reactions become visible instead of automatic, where patterns repeat loudly enough to be noticed. The key during this stage is not force, it is patience with awareness. Instead of asking, why can't I change yet? The better question is, what is my resistance trying to protect? That question alone shifts the process from frustration to understanding. When you stop fighting the stage of not being ready, readiness accelerates. You stop pretending to be further along than you are. You stop shaming yourself for hesitation. You stop demanding clarity before the foundation is built. And slowly, something shifts. You become less reactive, more observant, more honest with yourself. You begin to see patterns instead of isolated problems. You feel less urgency to prove anything. You start valuing alignment over speed. This is how readiness forms. Not through pressure, not through comparison, but through internal reorganization. The stage of not being ready ends when resistance softens, when truth no longer feels like an attack, but like information. When responsibility feels empowering instead of heavy. When change feels possible instead of threatening. And when that moment arrives, it often feels sudden. But it isn't. It has been building quietly all along. Not being ready was never the problem. Ignoring the stage was. And once you understand that, you stop fighting where you are and start preparing for what comes next. Chapter 4. How your mindset blocks. Opportunities rarely announce themselves clearly. They don't arrive with guarantees, instructions, or certainty. Most of the time, they appear quietly, disguised as inconvenience, uncertainty, or effort. And this is where mindset becomes the gatekeeper. People often believe they miss opportunities because they lack resources, connections, or luck. But far more often, opportunities are missed because the mind is not prepared to recognize them. Not because they are invisible, but because the internal lens is misaligned. Your mindset doesn't just influence how you respond to opportunity. It determines whether you notice it at all. When the mind is shaped by fear, opportunity looks like risk. When it's shaped by doubt, opportunity looks like pressure. When it's shaped by comfort, opportunity looks like disruption. So the mind filters it out. This happens automatically, not consciously. The brain is efficient. It scans for familiarity and minimizes uncertainty. Anything that threatens the current identity or routine is quietly categorized as not for me, often without a second thought. And then later, people say things like, I never get chances. Nothing ever works out for me. I always miss the right moment. But the moment was there. It just didn't pass the filter. Most opportunities don't feel exciting at first. They feel heavy. They feel demanding. They require responsibility before reward. And if your mindset is still oriented toward immediate comfort, the mind will reject them as unnecessary stress. This is why two people can be standing in the same situation and see completely different possibilities. One sees a burden, the other sees a doorway. One feels overwhelmed, the other feels challenged. The difference is not intelligence, it's interpretation. Mindset shapes interpretation. If your mindset is fixed, you look for certainty before acting. You want proof before commitment. You wait until the outcome feels safe, and by the time safety arrives, the opportunity has passed. If your mindset is defensive, you look for reasons not to engage. You scan for flaws. You focus on what could go wrong. You protect yourself from disappointment. And in doing so, you block growth. This isn't pessimism, it's protection. But protection has a cost. Opportunities are rarely comfortable invitations. They are tests of readiness, and they don't wait for you to feel confident. They appear when the conditions are possible, not when you feel prepared. This creates a tension. The mind says, I'm not ready yet. The opportunity says, this is the moment, and whichever voice you trust more determines the outcome. Most people trust the voice that sounds familiar, the one that says, stay where you are, the one that promises safety, the one that avoids embarrassment, effort, or uncertainty. But that voice is not wisdom, it's habit, and habit keeps life predictable. Opportunities often require a shift in identity before they reward you. They ask you to act like the next version of yourself before you fully feel like that person. That gap creates discomfort. If your mindset demands internal certainty before external action, you will wait indefinitely. Because certainty is not the prerequisite for opportunity. Readiness is. Readiness does not mean confidence, it means willingness. Willingness to learn while moving. Willingness to be imperfect. Willingness to experience temporary discomfort for long-term alignment. When your mindset evolves, something subtle changes. You stop asking, what if this fails? And start asking, what will I learn? You stop needing guarantees and start trusting your ability to adapt. That shift expands perception. You begin to notice invitations instead of obstacles, patterns instead of coincidences, signals instead of noise. Opportunities that once felt overwhelming begin to feel appropriate. Not easy, but relevant. This doesn't mean you say yes to everything. A refined mindset doesn't chase opportunity blindly. It evaluates with clarity, not fear. It responds instead of reacts. But without that clarity, opportunities are filtered out before evaluation even begins. This is why mindset work always comes before results. If your internal framework remains unchanged, external improvements won't last. You may stumble into a good situation temporarily, but without readiness, you won't be able to sustain it. You'll self-sabotage, hesitate, or retreat back to what feels known. Your mindset decides what you feel worthy of handling. When it expands, so does your capacity. Opportunities don't disappear from your life. They reappear at higher levels, demanding higher readiness. And each time they do, the question is the same. Will you interpret this moment through fear or through growth? The answer determines whether the door stays closed or quietly opens. Not because the world changed, but because your mind finally allowed you to see what was always there. Chapter 5. Silence before clarity. Most people believe clarity comes from thinking harder, from analyzing more, from asking better questions. So they keep searching. They keep consuming information. They keep filling every quiet moment with noise. And the more they do, the further clarity seems to move away. This is because clarity does not emerge from noise. It emerges from silence. Not silence as the absence of sound, but silence as the absence of mental interference. The kind of silence where the mind stops fighting for control and begins to observe instead. Your mind is constantly processing far more than you realize. It's detecting patterns, registering emotional signals, and organizing meaning beneath conscious awareness. But when the surface is flooded with constant stimulation, those deeper processes never rise into view. Noise blocks insight. Noise doesn't just come from the outside. It comes from overthinking, from rehearsing conversations that haven't happened, from replaying moments that already passed, from trying to force answers before the mind is ready to deliver them. This is why moments of real clarity often arrive unexpectedly. In the shower, on a walk, late at night when the world finally slows down. Not because you were trying harder, but because you finally stopped. Silence creates space, and space allows awareness to surface. Most people are uncomfortable with silence because it removes distraction. And when distraction disappears, unresolved thoughts and emotions become visible. That visibility can feel unsettling, so the mind rushes to fill the gap. Music, scrolling, talking, thinking, anything to avoid stillness. But stillness is not emptiness. It is access. Before clarity arrives, there is often a period of confusion. Before understanding forms, there is uncertainty. And before alignment settles in, there is quiet discomfort. Many people mistake this phase as being lost, when in reality, it is a necessary pause. Clarity doesn't shout over chaos. It waits for silence. This is why forcing decisions too early often leads to regret. When you decide from noise, you decide from fear, urgency, or external pressure. You choose what feels immediately relieving, not what is deeply aligned. Silence removes that pressure. In silence, you begin to hear subtle signals, patterns that repeat, thoughts that persist, emotions that linger without explanation. These are not distractions, they are data. But they only become clear when the mind stops interrupting itself. There is a difference between thinking and listening. Thinking is active. Listening is receptive. Clarity requires the second. This doesn't mean you withdraw from life or avoid responsibility. It means you stop demanding immediate answers. You allow questions to exist without forcing resolution. And in that allowance, the mind reorganizes itself. When you sit in silence long enough, certain truths rise naturally. What you've been avoiding becomes obvious. What no longer fits begins to feel heavy. What matters becomes simpler. This process cannot be rushed. Many people try to skip silence because it feels unproductive. They equate stillness with stagnation. But some of the most important internal shifts happen when nothing appears to be happening at all. Silence is preparation. It is the moment before clarity forms, the breath before understanding settles. When you give yourself silence, you stop reacting reflexively. You stop absorbing everyone else's opinions. You stop mistaking urgency for importance. And gradually, your internal signal becomes stronger than the external noise. This is when discernment develops. You begin to sense when something is aligned, not because it excites you, but because it feels steady. You recognize when something is wrong, not because it's dramatic, but because it creates internal friction. That level of clarity doesn't come from analysis. It comes from presence. Presence allows your mind to integrate what it already knows. The danger of constant noise is not confusion, it's distortion. When the mind is overstimulated, it prioritizes the loudest inputs, not the truest ones. It confuses familiarity with correctness. It confuses repetition with importance. Silence recalibrates that system. It brings attention back to what's essential. This is why clarity often feels calm when it finally arrives. There is no urgency attached to it. No need to convince. No emotional charge. It simply feels right. And that calmness is not passive. It is grounded. Clarity does not rush you. It steadies you. If you are currently feeling uncertain, overwhelmed, or mentally crowded, that is not a sign that you need more answers. It is a sign that you need less noise, less input, less reaction, less forcing. Give your mind silence and it will show you what matters. Not all at once, not dramatically, but clearly. Because before every moment of understanding, there is always a quiet space where it is allowed to appear. Chapter 6. Raising your mental capacity. Readiness is not a personality trait. It is not something you are born with or without. It is a capacity, and capacity can be trained. Most people assume that when they feel overwhelmed, confused, or emotionally reactive, the solution is to change their circumstances. A new job, a new routine, a new environment. But often, the real limitation is not external pressure. It is internal capacity. Your life can only expand to the level your mind can hold. Mental capacity is your ability to remain clear under pressure, to stay present with discomfort, and to process complexity without collapsing into reaction. When that capacity is low, even small challenges feel exhausting. When it is high, the same challenges feel manageable. This is why some people grow calmer as life becomes harder, while others become more anxious even when things improve. Capacity determines response. Raising mental capacity does not mean becoming emotionless. It means developing enough internal space to experience emotion without being controlled by it. It means you can feel stress without panicking, uncertainty without freezing, and responsibility without resentment. Most people never intentionally train this. Instead, they avoid discomfort. They seek constant relief. They distract themselves at the first sign of pressure. This keeps capacity low. Every time you escape discomfort prematurely, you teach your mind that pressure is dangerous. And the next time pressure appears, your tolerance is even lower. Over time, the threshold shrinks. Life begins to feel heavier, faster, and more overwhelming. Not because it changed, but because your capacity did not grow with it. Capacity grows through exposure, not avoidance. It grows when you stay present a little longer than you want to. When you delay reaction. When you sit with uncertainty without rushing to escape it. These moments seem insignificant, but they compound. Mental capacity is built in small, quiet choices. Choosing to pause before responding. Choosing to finish what you start. Choosing to remain disciplined when motivation fades. Choosing to observe your emotions instead of obeying them. None of these actions are dramatic, but together they rewire how your mind relates to pressure. As capacity increases, something important changes. Your internal noise decreases. You stop interpreting every challenge as a threat. You stop personalizing every obstacle. You stop assuming difficulty means something is wrong. Difficulty becomes information instead of judgment. This shift is essential for readiness, because readiness requires holding opposing experiences at once. Confidence with humility, action with patience, ambition with restraint. A low-capacity mind seeks resolution immediately. A high-capacity mind allows tension to exist without forcing answers. That tolerance creates clarity. Raising mental capacity also requires responsibility. Not the kind that feels heavy and punishing, but the kind that restores agency. When you take responsibility for your reactions, your attention, and your habits, you stop outsourcing control, and control returns power. You realize you don't need to control outcomes, only your response. That realization alone reduces anxiety and increases steadiness. Another element of capacity is discipline. Discipline is often misunderstood as restriction. In reality, it is structure, and structure reduces cognitive load. When your day has rhythm, your mind wastes less energy on decision-making. When your habits are intentional, your emotions stabilize. Discipline doesn't limit freedom, it creates it. As your mental capacity rises, you begin to trust yourself more. You stop needing constant reassurance. You stop chasing certainty. You start relying on your ability to adapt. That trust changes how you perceive challenges. Instead of asking, "Can I handle this?" you ask, "What is this teaching me?" That question alone expands capacity further. This process is gradual. There is no single moment where you suddenly feel ready. Readiness emerges as a byproduct of consistency, of showing up even when clarity hasn't arrived yet, of choosing alignment over comfort. And one day, without announcement, you realize something has shifted. Situations that once overwhelmed you no longer do. Conversations that once triggered you feel manageable. Decisions that once paralyzed you feel clear. Nothing magical happened. Your capacity caught up. This is why mental readiness cannot be rushed. It must be earned through repeated exposure to discomfort handled with awareness. Not avoided, not dramatized, simply faced. You don't become ready by knowing more. You become ready by holding more. More responsibility, more uncertainty, more truth. And as your capacity grows, your perception sharpens. Opportunities feel less threatening. Silence feels less empty. Pressure feels less personal. You begin to meet life with steadiness instead of resistance. That steadiness is readiness. And once your mind can hold the weight of the next level, it no longer feels heavy. It feels appropriate. Chapter 7. Detachment from old identity. One of the quietest reasons people remain stuck is not lack of effort, knowledge, or opportunity. It is attachment. Attachment to an old identity. An identity is not just how you describe yourself. It is how your mind organizes reality. It shapes what you feel responsible for, what you tolerate, what you defend, and what you avoid. And once an identity forms, the mind works tirelessly to protect it, even when that identity no longer serves you. You may say you want change, but if change threatens who you believe you are, resistance will appear. Not loudly, not consciously, but subtly, through hesitation, self-sabotage, and rationalization. The mind asks, if I let go of this version of myself, who am I without it? And until that question feels safe, growth slows. Old identities often form as survival strategies. They helped you cope, belong, or feel protected at some point in your life. Maybe you learned to be agreeable to avoid conflict. Maybe you learned to stay quiet to avoid judgment. Maybe you learned to overthink to feel in control. Those patterns once had a purpose. But purpose does not mean permanence. The problem begins when the mind treats outdated identities as fixed truths instead of temporary adaptations. When that happens, any signal pushing you forward feels like a threat to stability. You're not resisting change. You're protecting familiarity. Detachment from old identity does not mean rejection or self-criticism. It means honest recognition. It means acknowledging that the version of you that once helped you survive may now be limiting your ability to grow. This is one of the most uncomfortable realizations in personal development, because letting go of an identity can feel like loss. You may feel disoriented. You may feel less certain. You may feel like you're betraying who you used to be. But what you're really doing is making space. Old identity clings to predictable patterns. It prefers roles you already know how to play. It repeats stories you've told yourself for years, and because those stories feel familiar, they feel true. I'm just not that kind of person. I've always been this way. That's just how I am. These phrases sound harmless, but they are anchors. They tie you to a past version of yourself and quietly dismiss the possibility of evolution. Detachment begins when you stop confusing identity with destiny. You realize that traits are not permanent, habits are not character, and past behavior is not proof of future limitation. When you see this clearly, identity loosens its grip, but the mind will resist. It will remind you of past failures. It will replay moments of embarrassment. It will question your right to change. This is not intuition. It is conditioning. The mind prefers what it can predict. And a new identity is unpredictable. It demands learning. It requires patience. It removes excuses that once felt comforting. That's why the transition feels unstable. You're standing between identities. The old one no longer fits, but the new one hasn't fully formed yet. This space can feel empty, and many people rush to fill it by reverting to familiar behavior. But this space is where transformation happens. Detachment does not require you to know who you are becoming. It only requires you to stop clinging to who you were. You don't need a complete blueprint. You need openness. When you stop defending the old identity, awareness increases. You notice when reactions are automatic. You see patterns instead of just outcomes. You catch yourself repeating behaviors that no longer align with your values. That awareness creates choice. Instead of asking, "What would I normally do?" you ask, "What would align now?" This question marks a shift from identity-driven behavior to intention-driven behavior. It's subtle, but powerful. Detachment also brings humility. You stop needing to prove consistency. You stop performing for an image. You allow yourself to be a beginner again. That humility makes learning possible, and learning accelerates readiness. As you detach, emotional charge decreases. Triggers lose their intensity. You respond instead of react. You begin to feel less personally attacked by feedback or challenge. Why? Because your sense of self is no longer rigid. Flexibility increases capacity. You begin to see that you are not your thoughts, not your habits, not your past reactions. You are the awareness that can observe and adjust them. That realization is liberating. It returns agency. Detachment from old identity is not a single decision. It is a practice, a repeated choice to question automatic narratives, to pause before labeling yourself, to act in alignment even when it feels unfamiliar, and over time, something remarkable happens. The new identity doesn't feel forced. It feels natural, because it wasn't built on denial. It was built on awareness. You didn't abandon who you were. You outgrew it. And once that happens, readiness increases rapidly. Because nothing holds you back more than loyalty to a version of yourself that no longer exists. Letting go is not weakness. It is permission. Permission to become someone your mind is finally ready to support. Chapter 8. When the mind finally clicks. There is a moment in every internal shift that feels sudden, even though it has been forming for a long time. A moment when things don't just make sense intellectually, but connect. When effort eases, when resistance drops, when the mind finally clicks. This moment is often misunderstood as luck, timing, or inspiration. But it is none of those things. It is the result of readiness reaching a threshold. Before the click, there is accumulation, observation without conclusion, practice without confidence, discomfort without clarity. You show up without fully understanding why. You reflect without immediate answers. You sit in silence even when it feels unproductive. And then, quietly, something aligns. The click is not dramatic. It doesn't arrive with excitement or urgency. It often comes with calm, a simple realization, a subtle shift in perception, a sense that something you are forcing no longer needs force. This is because the mind has finished reorganizing. For a long time, different parts of you were in conflict. Old beliefs clashed with new information. Habit fought intention. Identity resisted growth. That internal friction created confusion and fatigue. The click happens when that friction resolves. Not because everything is solved, but because the mind reaches coherence. The pieces don't just exist, they fit. This is why the same idea can feel meaningless for years and then suddenly feel obvious. The idea didn't change. Your internal structure did. You became capable of holding it without resistance. Before readiness, insight feels like pressure. After readiness, it feels like confirmation. This distinction matters. When the mind clicks, you stop needing to convince yourself. You stop debating endlessly. You stop seeking external validation for internal decisions. You trust the alignment you feel because it is grounded, not emotional. The click does not eliminate uncertainty. It changes your relationship with it. You no longer interpret uncertainty as danger. You see it as part of movement. This is why action becomes easier after the click. Not because motivation spikes, but because internal conflict quiets down. Energy that was once spent resisting is now available for direction. You move with less noise. Many people chase this moment aggressively. They try to force insight through pressure, intensity, or constant consumption. But the click cannot be demanded. It can only be allowed. It arrives when resistance leaves. Resistance doesn't disappear because you overpower it. It disappears because you understand it. You stop fighting your hesitation. You stop judging your pace. You stop arguing with where you are. And in that acceptance, readiness completes itself. The click often changes how you see your past. You recognize patterns that were invisible before. You understand why certain things didn't work, why certain doors stayed closed, why certain lessons repeated. Not with regret, but with clarity. You realize that nothing was wasted. It was preparation. This realization is stabilizing. It removes urgency. It reduces self-blame. It replaces impatience with trust. Trust in process. Trust in timing. Trust in your capacity to grow without forcing outcomes. After the click, you become more selective. Not because you are closed off, but because you are clear. You no longer chase every option. You don't feel pulled in 10 directions. You recognize what aligns and what doesn't with less effort. This discernment is a direct result of readiness. Your mind is no longer overwhelmed by possibility. It can filter effectively. It knows what matters. It knows what to ignore. And that knowledge is felt, not argued. The click also changes how you relate to effort. You still work. You still practice. You still face discomfort. But the work feels cleaner, less emotional, less dramatic. You're not trying to prove anything anymore. You're simply doing what aligns. This is one of the clearest signs that readiness has arrived. When action is no longer fueled by fear of staying the same, but by clarity about where you're going. The mind that has clicked doesn't rush. It doesn't panic. It doesn't cling. It moves steadily. Importantly, this moment doesn't mean the journey is over. It means the direction is set. Confusion gives way to orientation. Doubt gives way to curiosity. Resistance gives way to engagement. You stop asking, "Am I ready?" You start asking, "What's next?" And even that question feels lighter. The click is not something you hold on to forever. It is a transition point, a recalibration. From this place, growth continues, but with less friction. You will still face challenges. You will still outgrow new identities. You will still encounter moments of uncertainty. But now, you trust your ability to navigate them, because you've felt what readiness feels like. Quiet, stable, clear. And once the mind has clicked once, it becomes easier to recognize the process again. You don't fear the periods of confusion as much. You know what they are building toward. You understand that clarity is not chased. It emerges, and when it does, It doesn't shout to get your attention. It simply settles in and stays. Chapter 9. Seeing life differently without changing life. There is a subtle shift that changes everything, yet looks like nothing from the outside. No dramatic events, no sudden breakthroughs, no visible transformation, and yet, internally, life feels entirely different. This shift does not come from changing your circumstances. It comes from changing how you perceive them. Most people believe relief will arrive when their situation improves, when problems are solved, when uncertainty disappears. But perception precedes circumstance, and until perception changes, even improved conditions feel unstable. You don't experience life as it is. You experience it as it means something to you. Meaning shapes emotion. Emotion shapes behavior. Behavior shapes outcome. So when meaning changes, everything downstream changes with it. This is why two people can face the same challenge and have opposite reactions. One feels trapped, the other feels tested. One feels discouraged, the other feels focused. The difference is not optimism, it is interpretation. When your mind becomes ready, interpretation shifts naturally. You stop seeing obstacles as personal failures. You stop interpreting delay as rejection. You stop assuming difficulty means you're off track. Instead, challenge becomes neutral information. This neutrality is powerful. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you are no longer emotionally entangled. Emotional entanglement drains energy. It turns every problem into a threat to identity. When perception shifts, problems remain, but they lose their emotional weight. And when weight is removed, movement becomes possible. This is why perception is often more important than strategy. A clear mind can navigate imperfect conditions. A cluttered mind struggles even in ideal ones. As readiness deepens, you begin to notice how often your emotional reactions were not responses to reality, but to interpretation. You see how often your mind added urgency, judgment, or fear where none was required. That awareness creates space. In that space, you choose differently. Instead of reacting automatically, you pause. Instead of assuming intent, you observe behavior. Instead of catastrophizing, you assess proportion. This doesn't happen because you try harder. It happens because your mind has learned to separate facts from meaning. That separation is clarity. When you see life differently, you stop needing it to be different in order to feel steady. You don't wait for perfect conditions to feel grounded. You carry steadiness into imperfect ones. This is not resignation. It is resilience. Resilience is not built by avoiding hardship. It is built by changing your relationship to it. When perception shifts, hardship no longer defines your inner state. It becomes part of the terrain, not the destination. This shift also changes how you evaluate progress. You stop measuring success only by external results. You start noticing internal alignment. You ask different questions. Instead of, is this working? You ask, am I responding well? Instead of, how fast am I moving? You ask, am I moving with clarity? These questions produce steadier momentum. You become less reactive to setbacks, less inflated by wins, less dependent on external validation. Not because you don't value outcomes, but because you no longer let outcomes define your internal state. This is what emotional independence looks like. Life continues to present challenges. Relationships remain complex. Goals still require effort. Uncertainty doesn't disappear. But your experience of these things changes. You feel less overwhelmed, less rushed, less personally attacked by circumstance. You gain perspective. Perspective allows you to zoom out without disengaging, to care without clinging, to act without anxiety. This balance is rare because it requires mental readiness. Before readiness, perception is tightly linked to emotion. Every event feels personal, every outcome feels defining. After readiness, perception loosens. You see patterns, cycles, and context. You understand that not everything requires an emotional response. This understanding brings calm, and calm improves decision-making. You stop reacting to temporary states. You plan with long-term clarity. You make fewer impulsive choices. You invest energy where it actually matters. This is how life begins to feel more manageable without becoming easier. You realize that peace does not come from controlling circumstances. It comes from controlling interpretation. And interpretation is a function of mindset. As this chapter of readiness deepens, you experience something subtle but profound. You stop waiting for life to change before you feel okay. You start feeling okay while life continues to change. That shift creates freedom. Freedom from constant tension. Freedom from emotional volatility. Freedom from the illusion that happiness is conditional. You don't deny difficulty. You simply don't let it define you. And that is the quiet power of seeing life differently. Nothing around you may look changed, but inside, everything is. Because when your perception evolves, life doesn't need to be different for you to move through it with clarity, steadiness, and intention. Chapter 10. Staying ready for the next level. Readiness is not a destination you arrive at and remain forever. It is a state you maintain. Many people assume that once clarity appears, life becomes stable, that once they understand themselves better, confusion disappears for good. But growth does not work that way. Every new level introduces new complexity. Every expansion requires another recalibration. So, readiness must be sustained. Staying ready does not mean staying perfect. It means staying aware. It means recognizing when your mindset begins to narrow again, when comfort starts to replace curiosity, when routine slowly turns into rigidity. The mind naturally seeks efficiency. Once something works, it wants to repeat it. That efficiency is useful until it becomes limitation. What once created progress can quietly become the very thing that slows it down. This is why people sometimes outgrow their own success. They cling to methods that once served them. They protect identities that once felt empowering. They resist updates because the old version still works. But life does not reward maintenance. It responds to adaptation. Staying ready requires humility. Humility to admit that what you know now is not final. Humility to accept feedback without defensiveness. Humility to remain a student even when you feel competent. This humility keeps the mind flexible. A flexible mind adjusts without breaking. It recognizes when conditions change and responds instead of resists. It doesn't take change personally. It doesn't interpret challenge as threat to worth. This flexibility is a skill. It's practiced by regularly questioning assumptions, by reviewing habits that feel automatic, by noticing when certainty turns into stubbornness. These moments are subtle, but they signal when readiness needs renewal. Staying ready also means protecting clarity. Clarity is fragile when it's neglected. Noise creeps back in. Distraction multiplies. External opinions begin to override internal alignment. When this happens, readiness fades without announcement. So boundaries matter, not rigid boundaries that isolate you, but intentional ones that protect mental space. Space to reflect, space to reset, space to reconnect with what matters. Without space, perception dulls. Another part of staying ready is honoring cycles. Energy fluctuates, focus shifts. Periods of intensity are followed by periods of integration. If you expect constant forward motion, you will misinterpret rest as regression. But rest is not loss of readiness, it is part of sustaining it. The mind integrates growth in cycles. After expansion comes consolidation. After insight comes embodiment. Trying to skip this phase leads to burnout and confusion. Staying ready means respecting this rhythm. It also means continuing to take responsibility for your inner state. Not blaming circumstances for emotional reactions. Not outsourcing stability to external conditions. When you do this, you remain centered even as environments change. Responsibility is grounding. It keeps you anchored when uncertainty arises. As readiness stabilizes, your relationship with ambition changes. You still want more, but not from lack. You pursue growth without urgency. You move forward without needing to escape where you are. This reduces internal conflict. You stop rushing to the next milestone. You focus on alignment over speed. And paradoxically, this often accelerates progress, because clear action compounds. Staying ready also requires detachment from outcomes, not indifference, detachment. You engage fully, but you do not attach your identity to results. This allows you to learn without ego and adjust without shame. Failure becomes information. Success becomes feedback. Neither defines you. This emotional balance keeps readiness intact. Finally, staying ready means remembering that clarity will need renewal. The mindset that reveals one level will not reveal the next. What once felt expansive will eventually feel limiting. And when that happens, the process begins again. Confusion returns, questions reappear, old certainty dissolves. This is not a mistake. It is the signal that growth is calling for an update. If you resist this, stagnation follows. If you welcome it, readiness deepens. You don't cling to clarity. You respect its role and release it when it no longer fits. That is how growth remains sustainable. Readiness is not about having all the answers. It's about staying open to better questions. When you stay ready, you don't fear the unknown. You recognize it as the doorway to the next level. And when that doorway appears, you don't hesitate. Not because you are fearless, but because your mind is prepared to step forward without needing certainty. That is what it means to stay ready. And that is how growth continues. Quietly, steadily, one level at a time. When readiness becomes a way of living, if there is one truth that runs through everything you've heard so far, it is this. Your life does not change when circumstances change. It changes when you do, not in dramatic moments, not through sudden breakthroughs, but through quiet shifts in perception. Readiness is not a moment of arrival. It is a relationship you build with yourself, a way of meeting life with awareness instead of resistance, with responsibility instead of reaction, with clarity instead of noise. Throughout this audiobook, you've seen how the mind filters reality, how truth initially feels uncomfortable, how not being ready is a stage, not a failure. You've seen how silence creates clarity, how capacity expands through discipline, and how detaching from old identity opens space for growth. None of this was about becoming someone else. It was about becoming available to who you already are beneath conditioning, habit, and fear. When your mind becomes ready, you don't suddenly gain control over life. You gain something far more valuable, the ability to respond wisely. You stop fighting uncertainty. You stop demanding guarantees. You stop trying to force understanding before it's time. You learn to trust the process. This trust is not passive, it is grounded. It allows you to move forward without rushing, to act without panic, and to pause without guilt. It gives you patience without stagnation and ambition without desperation. Readiness softens urgency, and when urgency fades, clarity can speak. You begin to recognize that life has always been offering lessons, invitations, and signals. The difference now is that you are no longer filtering them through fear or outdated identity. You see more, you react less, you choose with intention. This is what inner alignment feels like. It doesn't make life easy, it makes life honest. Challenges remain, doubt still appears, confusion still returns in cycles, but you no longer interpret these experiences as signs that something is wrong. You see them as part of growth's rhythm. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? You start asking, what is this asking of me? That question changes everything because it places you back in relationship with your own development. It reminds you that readiness is built, not granted. That clarity emerges, not demanded. And that growth unfolds when you allow it the time and space it requires. You don't need to rush the next level. You don't need to force insight. You don't need to become someone overnight. You only need to remain open. Open to learning, open to adjustment, open to releasing what no longer fits. When readiness becomes a way of living, you stop chasing certainty. You develop confidence in your ability to adapt. You trust yourself to meet what comes next without needing to control it. And that trust creates steadiness. From that steadiness, decisions become simpler. Actions become cleaner. Life feels less like something to survive and more like something to engage with intentionally. Nothing external may change immediately, but internally, you will know. You will feel it in how you respond, in how you listen, in how you move forward without hesitation. Because when your mind is ready, you don't need permission to see clearly. You simply do. And from that place, whatever comes next is no longer something you fear. It's something you are prepared to meet.